Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our continuing Wednesday webinars with the Florida chapter. My name is Sherry Kennan. I'm the Member Services Manager for the chapter. And today it is my great pleasure to introduce to all of you Brad Steele. Brad has been an integral part of the private club industry for over 15 years. He started Private Club Consultants to provide in-depth legal and operational answers for America's top private clubs. Over the years, Brad has become one of the leading resources for the private club industry on legal, legislative, and regulatory matters. Prior to opening Private Club Consultants, Brad served as the Vice President of Government Relations and General Counsel for the National Club Association. In that capacity, he directed legal and advocacy efforts for the private club industry. Brad first cut his teeth in Washington, working for the Vice President of the United States, a member of Congress, and a national political committee. He then studied law at Oxford University and earned his degree from the University of Oklahoma. Upon graduation, he practiced law in Indiana and served as a county and city attorney, as well as a judge of the Indiana court. While there, Brad returned to the political arena as a candidate for Congress and the Indiana State House of Representatives. Following his campaigns, he came back to Washington and has been helping private clubs ever since. Brad is a featured speaker for club management and allied industries, and his perspectives have been sought by leading industry periodicals as well as the national media. All told, over his 25 years of experience as an attorney and industry leader allows PCC to offer actionable advice to clubs so they function within the law, even when the law is hard to understand. We are pleased that Brad could join us today to provide insight on how Washington is impacting our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brad Steele.
Thank you, Sherry. I do appreciate it tremendously. It's great to see all of you. I know that you have nothing else to do, right? It's not hot. You should be out playing golf. It's comfortable, cool breezes, right? It's Florida. But I'm pleased that you're here, and hopefully we'll have a little fun today. And we'll talk a little bit about exactly how difficult it has been, or should I say is about to become, for all of you when you deal with your independent contractors. Yes, there are two new rules, one from the Department of Labor and one from the National Labor Relations Board. And ultimately, that means that there is far more trouble for private clubs as we move forward with these new rules. And as Sherry said, I'm pleased to be bringing you this information as the founder of Private Club Consultants. We were created to provide that in-depth legal and operational answers for America's top private clubs. We like to help club leaders like you in really four areas. Number one, to help you resolve legal issues, those that might come from staff, God forbid, or those that might come from members or even guests, ultimately functioning as your general counsel. Additionally, we like to help club leaders modernize their bylaws and their governance documents, those documents that help you run your club better, but quite often are probably a little behind the times in terms of your culture and tradition, and maybe not in full compliance with your state law. Additionally, we like to help clubs protect the two most important things that make you who you are: your private status and your tax-exempt status. I know many of you deal with Phil Newman, and ultimately he does a great job with regard to that, but we can help to ensure your private status is protected also. And finally, we help you implement new legislative and regulatory requirements that may come from the local, may come from the state, or from the federal level, as we'll talk about today. I like to say that PCC is your trusted source for answers. So let's jump in and give you some of those answers today. Here's our roadmap. This is where we're going to go. We're first going to talk about the misclassification problem, misclassifying your independent contractors who should be classified as employees. That's a major issue, and that's what this whole discussion is about. We'll then talk about those two new rules, the one from the Federal Department of Labor and the other from the National Labor Relations Board. And then finally, we'll give you some tips and tactics on ensuring how best you can protect your club with these two new rules in mind. So who's not excited about this, right? It's 10:10. Who can't be more excited than talking about the Department of Labor and the National Labor Relations Board? Come on, it's going to be great. All right, hopefully you all have a mimosa. That's what I'm hoping. Let's jump right into the misclassification problem. Now, when I deal with clubs across the United States, they always have sort of the same question. They sort of wonder, what is this misclassification? It's, as I say, it's when you treat your independent contractor like an employee, but you don't provide the benefits of employment under federal law, and indeed under state law. Florida is a little less stringent, which is a great thing about Florida. But at the end of the day, right now, federal law really does place some significant burdens on an employer to ensure that that classification is done correctly, that your contractor, so we're talking about who? Your caddy. We're talking about your fitness instructor, your yoga instructor, your massage therapist. Maybe, and a lot of clubs in Florida do this, and this is a problem for other reasons, but your golf pro or your tennis pro, those folks whom you hire to take on a certain role at the club who aren't provided employment benefits. Ultimately, club control and direction of these workers can ultimately lay the groundwork for significant claims against the club. And it's not just you, not just private clubs, but certainly we need to be aware because we consistently hire more independent contractors to take on roles at the club. That if we don't make them employees or if we don't treat them as independent contractors, we're going to find ourselves in a bit of a problem. A lot of folks think, well, this is just a tax problem. I mean, it's unfortunate. We don't want to do it at my club. However, it's just a tax issue. And it isn't just a tax issue. As a matter of fact, the biggest problem here is that this is a wage issue. 9 times out of 10, the claims that are brought forward against clubs really for what's colloquially called wage theft. So what does that mean? If you're in an employment relationship, if you treat this contractor as you would any other employee at the club, then you are required under federal and state law to provide basic things like minimum wage and overtime. And that's specifically outlined in the Fair Labor Standards Act, federal law that dictates how you treat an employee. Interestingly enough, this Fair Labor Standards Act has been in place since FDR. So, I'm sorry, since the 30s, for those of you who are young enough not to know FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So President Roosevelt signed this into law. I think it was in 34. The law hasn't changed. Folks, this is not a new issue for folks in the club industry. At the end of the day, this has been around for, nigh on 100 years. There have been changes to it. The changes are simply what is the minimum wage, right? Right now, we know it's $7.25. I think in Florida, you're going up to $12, I think next year or maybe in September. But at the end of the day, the Fair Labor Standards Act is what establishes this requirement for an employer to provide adequate wages. And once that individual works more than 40 hours, that you provide time and a half as compensation. So ultimately, the Fair Labor Standards Act is what we're really worried about, especially from a federal perspective. And again, it can also be done so in the state of Florida as an issue that arises under state court or state administrative agency. But simply labeling your worker as a contractor, simply saying, oh, great, well, we're just going to, we don't want to put you on salary. We're going to go ahead and just have you as an independent contractor. And then treating that employee or that worker just as you would any other employee is exactly the problem. And you don't get to say, well, actually, we have always expected him to be an independent contractor because we called him that or we labeled him as such. That's not going to avoid the employment relationship. We'll talk about under the National Labor Relations Board's rule. There is one factor that talks about what the understanding of the parties is. Do you believe that I'm an independent contractor? Does the worker think he or she is an independent contractor? That's fine. But that factor alone, there's 11 factors in the NLRB rule. 11, can you imagine? The fact is that's just one of 11. So 9 times out of 10, what you have to be careful of is understanding that simply labeling that employee, that worker, as an independent contractor ain't going to cut it. So why should we worry, right? If the employee worker thinks he or she is an independent contractor, won't that be good enough, right? Well, we would hope. But at the end of the day, what you can't do is simply anticipate and expect that your contractors are going to feel great about the club all the time. What I consistently hear is, well, general manager didn't say hi to me. So, I'm just tired. I've been working here for 10 years and I'm putting in 60 hours a week. I can't stand it. When season's in full bore, the reality is they don't love me as much as they say they do. And it's, almost like dealing with millennial employees. You got to pat them on the head. And if you don't, your biggest problem is they become disgruntled. And if they get disgruntled, they talk to lawyers and they talk to administrative or government agencies. And again, that's where the lawyer will come in to talk about, well, interestingly enough, you didn't pay $12 an hour, $11 an hour right now, going to 12 in Florida, or you didn't pay the $7.25 per hour for my employee. You had him, let's say he's looping. You had him looping for 2.5 rounds, and guess what? That's 10 hours. He didn't get $750. So the reality is, when we start to think about what exactly the employee is going to complain about, and to whom, the lawyer or the government agency, we know we can have significant problems. And again, if it's not just the agency like the Department of Labor that they go to, it may just be a complaint filed under the Fair Labor Standards Act in and of itself. So you got wage and hour laws that you violate maybe in Florida. Certainly the federal Fair Labor Standards Act can be cause for concern. And then those state and federal government agencies can pursue action as well. So here are some examples that it's not gone well. The results haven't been as bad as we expected, but the fact of the matter is, when you get sued, the likelihood the suit is going to be a class action suit. It's not going to be one caddy, one massage therapist, one yoga instructor who complains. They're going to amass a class, all of those whom you've hired as an independent contractor, but treated as an employee, are going to come together. And when they do, those class action suits can be relatively large. So 4 clubs in New Jersey were sued in the state just over the last 2 years for classifying their caddies as independent contractors. You just don't have the ability to do that when you treat them as we'll talk about. So the fact of the matter is, if you treat them as an employee, you can't then say, don't worry, they're not employees. Those class action lawsuits are significant, they're massive, but most importantly, they have a significant impact on the club's reputation. Clubs in Florida, yes, Florida. Streamsong, I think most of you know, Streamsong Resort, golf course out about, I think, a little north and west, or east, I should say, of Tampa Bay, got tagged for this exact same issue, but this was under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So in federal court, club in Georgia, club in New York, all of them failed to classify appropriately their caddies. In other words, treating those caddies as employees, but calling them independent contractors. And if you lose, you're on the hook for penalties by the federal government. And you've got back wages clearly that you have to pay. You'll have the attorney's fees of those caddies or of those misclassified workers. And that's the reason why there are class action suits, more caddies, more yoga instructors, more fitness instructors that we can cram into the class, the higher the attorney's fees for the plaintiffs. And then, as I say, you're going to have that reputational impact. And of course, your own lawyer's fees. So yes, I need a new boat, but I don't need it that way. I'm kidding. Who needs a boat, right? Ultimately, if those misclassification problems come to emerge under a class action lawsuit, then there's going to be a knock on the door from the Department of Labor and the State Department of Revenue and the Internal Revenue Service. So yes, there is a tax component to this, but your biggest issue is wage and hour problems. So please be aware that you got the aspect of potential misclassification and a class action lawsuit if you fail to appropriately classify your worker as an independent contractor or employee. But the government actions can be pretty aggressive as well. Tesla, now, I mean, again, it's Elon Musk, what do you expect? But Tesla was fined by California for classifying its corporate janitors as independent contractors. Now, yes, that's California, that's not Florida, but states are out there. How about in New Jersey? Fines and penalties are even getting higher in New Jersey. First offense, $5,000 per worker for failure to appropriately classify and therefore have wage theft. $10,000 per worker for a second violation. So clearly clubs in New Jersey have to be very, very careful. Now, these are two very liberal states, California and New Jersey. Florida isn't, but at the same time, there's that mission creep, and we don't want to see that kind of issue arise in Florida. Most importantly, please be aware that at the end of the day, private country clubs, golf clubs, city clubs, even if you're associated with a residential community, that they aren't exempt from this. So we get some exemptions clearly if we're truly private from the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Florida's anti-discrimination law. We are exempt from those because we are a unique entity. We are not a unique entity when it comes to whether you classify a worker correctly. So please keep that in mind. All right, let's take a quick look here at exactly what our friends at the Department of Labor have created. The good news with all of this is simply as follows. Currently, the Department of Labor has no Secretary of Labor. The former Secretary of Labor, Matty Walsh, my Boston accent, I'm sure you've all got your Massachusetts members, so I'll try to do the best. Matty Walsh has gone off to be the National Hockey League Player Association executive director. So he leaves the federal government, and now we've got this gaping hole in the Secretary of Labor's office. They tried to promote the Deputy Secretary of Labor, Julie Sue. Unfortunately for Julie Sue, Democrats, though they are in control of the United States Senate, don't like her that much. And she's having a problem getting confirmed. So rules that were brought out, that were proposed, that should have been concluded, and this is one of them, probably last month, are still waiting the secretary to be approved, confirmed by the Senate to get the final stamp of approval. Now, the Biden administration doesn't want to change anything to this new independent contractor rule. The Biden administration is more than comfortable moving forward with it, even though there were a ton of comments provided by the general public, businesses like clubs and others, that said this rule in its proposed form is bad for our business. But the fact of the matter is the Biden administration isn't going to make any significant changes. They just aren't able to finalize it yet until they get their Secretary of Labor confirmed or they come up with a new nominee. But that's going to happen. And it's going to happen, unfortunately, probably by the beginning of fall. So the only good news out of this Department of Labor new independent contractor rule is we've got about 2 or 3 months before we have to worry about it being going into full effect. So what does the new rule discuss? Well, it discusses President Obama's 6-factor economic reality test. Now, you may recall back in the day, you may have seen me when I was with the National Club Association talk about this economic reality test. And as they always say, everything old is new again in Washington, D.C., and it's back in a pretty big way. It's back because, as I say, we know it's going to take place and become fully effective in October. This gives us some time to plan for it. But the reality is it's a complete 180 from what was on the books at the Department of Labor for the previous 4 years. So what is this 6-factor economic reality test? Well, I'm going to quickly go through these factors. Each one of these needs to be taken, in the totality of all 6. We were going to review all of them together, make a determination of what is and is not the most crucial factors, and then decide whether you, as the employer, failed to appropriately classify your worker as an independent contractor or as an employee. So first factor to worry about, standard one, right? Whether the club controls the work and the worker. Ultimately, that means what 95% of clubs do is going to be a problem. And that is, does the independent contractor work for other people? Does he have the opportunity to go out and go be a yoga instructor or go give tennis lessons to other clubs? If that's something he's able to do, that's good. But if he can't, we've got a problem. Does he set his own schedule? Does he set his own fees? Please do not set the fees for any of your independent contractors. Is he trained, clothed? Does he get disciplined by anyone on your staff? If he does, and if any of those things are really a check mark in the column of employee, we know we're going to have a problem passing this first factor's scrutiny. All right, let's take a look at the second factor. Whether the worker creates an opportunity for profit or for business based on his own business intelligence. At the end of the day, does the independent contractor market the business? Does he have business cards? Does he have a website? Does he have a LinkedIn page? Does he accept business or decline business based on an opportunity to make more money, based on sound business decisions, not ultimately one who decides, well, sure, I suppose I can throw in another Zumba class after my 11 o'clock class. What the heck, I'll make some more money. That's not business acumen. That's not a determination of how best to grow the business based on my capability as a business person. That's just me taking advantage of an opportunity. So we know that there are those individual workers, independent contractors, who are engaged in their own business, who are making those kinds of decisions. If they do that, great. If they don't, if they just show up to work and do what you want them to do, that's not going to be a good check in the column of independent contractor. That's going to look more like an employee. How about number 3, whether the worker invests in his business Well, that's clear, right? We know that an individual who runs a business, me included, private club consultants, we invest in the business to ensure it grows. That means entrepreneurial investments. That means ensuring that I can do things that reduce costs or ultimately that extend my market reach. So does your independent contractor do that? Does your caddy do that? Does your fitness instructor, your yoga instructor, your massage therapist, do they do those kinds of things? If they do, great. That's perfect. Do they take additional classes? If I'm a fitness instructor and I get further certifications, does that help my business? Of course it does. I can signify that I have these certifications. I am better able to get better classes, better clientele, and ultimately more money. Those are the kinds of things that you need to see to have that check mark in an independent contractor column. Number 4, whether the service rendered requires some sort of special skill. This is a pretty simple one. I was doing this presentation for a club in Tennessee at the volunteer chapter. And I walk up and there's a Roto-Rooter truck. Well, let me tell you, clearly the Roto-Rooter man is an independent contractor, right? Because he brings a skill to the club that you as a club general manager would not train and would not have one of your employees do. That's what we need to think about with regard to our other independent contractors, right? If we've got a golf club and we require caddies, there is no way to get around the fact, and this is part of the problem in New Jersey and New York with those lawsuits, that those are integral, those are clearly special skills that I'm going to have my employees do. I have to have them there and they have to know how to caddy. So the reality is I would be training those employees. But these are independent contractors, or at least I'm calling them independent contractors. That's a problem. So if it's a special skill, something you wouldn't have at the club, wouldn't train one of your employees to do, fine. But if I've got a 70,000, let's just say 50,000 square foot fitness facility, then I'm probably going to have a hard time explaining why I would hire an independent contractor to be a fitness instructor rather than actually having employees who would be fitness instructors. All right, number 5, whether there is this permanent, long-standing relationship between the club and the independent contractor. And this is probably one of the bigger problems for clubs across the United States. At the end of the day, when I have an employee who comes in or a worker who comes in, who's been there for 10 years, who comes into the employee parking lot, goes to the employee entrance, says hello to Marge, grabs a cup of coffee, says hello to the rest of the employees, and that's a person who's been at that club forever and a day doing an independent contractor role work. Fact of the matter is that person is more than likely going to be labeled, at least under the Department of Labor's economic reality test, as an employee, not an independent contractor. But if an independent contractor comes in for one specific project, let's just say one Zumba class. I know, I love Zumba classes. I'm kidding. And stays for a short period of time, is in and out and works elsewhere, that's fine. He or she may continue to come back for that Zumba class over the next 3 years, but we clearly see them doing other things, going other places, and their period of time at the club is limited. That's good. That's a positive. So how long is that relationship and how permanent are they there at the club, right? So extent of time with regard to one class over 3 years, every day or every week is fine. But someone who's always there for a longer period of time, now we've got a problem, right? And that's where that permanent working relationship between the worker and the club becomes a sticking point and another check in the column of employee. And finally, number 6, whether the service rendered is an integral part of the club. Ultimately, is it critical? Is it necessary? Is it central to the club's functioning? I go back to those caddies at golf clubs. If it's mandatory, there is no to have a caddy, there is no way that a club is going to be able to say, well, this isn't an integral part of our business, right? If we put the investment for a 40 or 50,000 square foot fitness facility and we don't have fitness instructors, we're going to have a problem making that argument that this is really an independent contractor, not an employee. That's what we need to take into consideration. For instance, things like a massage therapist. Well, that's a service we're providing. It's not something that we do. It's not critical or necessary to the club's business. That's fine. We get to see another opportunity for us to put a check in the independent contractor column for that particular work. But for others that are more critical, clearly we're going to have a problem. And that's what we have to take into consideration whether we're going to meet the requirements of this new rule. Don't forget your tennis pros. Don't forget your golf pros. If I'm a country club with 1,400 members, how do I have an independent contractor who's a tennis pro or a golf pro? All right, so at the end of the day, this 6-part rule, the 6-factor rule, the economic reality test, is a totality of the circumstances reviewed. What's that mean? No single factor is most important. Interestingly enough, the old rule did indicate, well, hey, look, there are 1 or 2 that are going to be the most important. So you're going to have some factors much the same as these 6 factors, to be honest with you. But hey, the most important one is control. And if you don't control them, then it's okay. Or the most important factor is, does he have entrepreneurial capabilities to be successful on his own? So it was a little more mushy, better for us. We loved that rule, gave us a little more leeway to ensure that there wasn't going to be successful prosecution, that we failed to misclassify our independent contractor. So that was a good rule for us. Folks, that rule's gone. And the economic dependence is really going to be the key now. When you take it all 6 factors, put them into a jar, shake it up. Ultimately, the question is going to be, is he economically dependent on the club for work? Or is he economically dependent on himself? If he pays the mortgage because he's working at your club, then 9 times out of 10, the Department of Labor is going to say, this is an employee, you've misclassified. In the event that he pays his mortgage or rent by his own endeavors, then the reality is we have a better opportunity to be classified as an independent contractor. As I say, this particular rule for the Department of Labor is in limbo simply because the Secretary of Labor has not been confirmed. But there are no expected changes to this rule. They've already gone through that review process. It has gone through the White House. The White House has approved everything. There aren't any significant changes. What we have now is just really an administrative snafu that's giving us some time. So this rule is likely to go effect in October. Begin the process now of taking a look at your independent contractors to determine where you feel most comfortable to ensure they meet the requirements of the economic realities test. Now, not only do we have to deal with the Department of Labor, but now we have the National Labor Relations Board that just produced a brand new independent contractor rule. Well, this rule came from a case, a lawsuit heard by the National Labor Relations Board. What's the National Labor Relations Board? It's a 5-member independent agency of the executive branch. 3 of those members are under the president's party, and 2 of those members are under the Republican Party. So a 5-member board, and it makes determinations about really 2 things. Number 1, union organization, and number 2, unfair labor practices, be it in union organizing or in ultimate employment. This National Labor Relations Board was created under the National Labor Relations Act. Again, that law, federal law, like the Fair Labor Standards Act, simply created how you can unionize, when you can unionize, and what employers must do. So this is the enforcement agency of that. Now, look, the great news in Florida is you don't have a lot of union folks. The bad news is this new rule actually came from Georgia. Ain't real union friendly there, is it? As a matter of fact, I'll give you a great example of why it's not very union friendly. It's not union friendly because the Democratic National Convention for president in 2024, at this time next year, was to be held in, well, the 2 places to be held, either Atlanta, Georgia, or Chicago. It's ultimately going to Chicago. And one of the major factors is that Atlanta is not a heavily unionized area, especially for things like hospitality, for clubs, hotels, and the rest. So union placed a lot of pressure on the White House. Biden decided, okay, we'll go to Chicago. That tells you that Georgia and Atlanta specifically ain't real union, except this rule came about based on a lawsuit filed by hairdressers, makeup artists, wig artists from the Atlanta Opera Company. They sued. The union wanted to, there's actually a union there about this, largely from the film industry. And they said, well, why don't we get the Atlanta opera folks to join our union? Well, what did the Atlanta Opera Company say? Well, you can only have employees in a union. Our hairdressers, our makeup artists, our wig artists are all independent contractors. So go take a hike, union. The union went to the NLRB. The NLRB reviewed it, and now they came down with this brand new, happy days, 11-factor test. That is in effect today. It actually reversed an old rule that had basically a 2-factor test and re-implemented, surprise, a rule that was in effect during the Obama administration. So 11 factors. I don't want to bore you with all those, but we'll hit through them pretty quickly. Number one, whether the club exerts control over the worker and the work. Surprise, right? Always there. That's a classic. We know that control is going to be a key. So again, is he supervised, trained, clothed, disciplined by the club? In the Atlanta Opera case, they told those wig makers, those makeup artist folks exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it. They gave them no time off, no opportunity to take time off during the run of the opera season. And ultimately, that was a check in the column of being an employee. As a matter of fact, I want you to understand that the Republican on the National Labor Relations Board also found this to be an employment circumstance. They were indeed employees, not independent contractors, and therefore allowed to join the union. So the factors of this particular case really established that, yeah, no, even Republicans couldn't say, well, no, these folks are independent contractors. So the Atlanta Opera case was not a good one by any stretch of the imagination, but it helped to flesh out these 11 factors. And ultimately, the Republican agreed. There happen to be 4 members on the National Labor Relations Board right now, 1 vacancy. That's why there's only 1 Republican. So the 3 Democrats approved this rule, as well as the 1 Republican. So the second factor, whether the worker is engaged in a distinct occupation or business. It's extremely important, again, that we can show this is sort of the same kind of Department of Labor requirement that says, hey, do they have entrepreneurial investment in the business? Are they using their business acumen? Do they have something here that's substantive, that's really there? Ultimately, does he have specific training in his work, and is he fully integrated, or is he fully integrated in the club? If he is, we got a problem. If he's got his own distinct business, we're gold. Whether the work is usually done under the direction of the club. If the club tells you when to work, how to work, and when and where to do it, we're in a bit of a bind. And again, that's exactly what happened in the Atlanta Opera Company's case. Whether the service rendered requires a special skill, well, certainly in the Atlanta Opera case, guess what? Yep, absolutely, special skill. They didn't have it. The opera company didn't have it. Their orchestra and their actors. They're not makeup artists. So that was a check in the column of being an independent contractor, but it wasn't really a big check, at least not enough to overcome the other factors in the column of being an employee. Whether the independent contractor or club supplies all instrumentalities of the work that's needed, the tools, the workplace, and indeed that was the case. So if the independent contractor is able to bring everything he or she needs to perform the task into the club, then you're going to be fine. But if he or she doesn't, and you provide everything, especially the workplace, then the reality is we've got a problem. That I want you to focus on when we think about our massage therapists, when we think about it at our club, our fitness instructors, etc., tennis or golf instructors. That's going to be an issue. If the tennis pro comes in with his own tennis balls, great, that's a help. Okay, but we've got the court there, right? And he can't function without that court. So we're going to have a workspace issue, and therefore number 5 could be a check in the employee column. How about number 6 of this new NLRB rule, where whether there is a permanent working relationship? Surprise, surprise. Again, short period of time, positive. That smacks of an independent contractor. But if he or she always comes back and is always there, and if they're not given an opportunity to go elsewhere during the time in which you hire them, then that's going to show an employment contract and that an employee relationship. So this goes back to in the Atlanta Opera case, during the opera season, those folks might want to do a movie because we know Atlanta does a lot of movies now, but they're tied in. They don't have an opportunity to do that. So at the end of the day, yeah, there is pretty much a working relationship, another check in the employee column. And of course, how does the club pay the worker? So if the independent contractor receives minimum wage and overtime, forget it. That's an employee. So we really got to make sure we're just providing them the stipend. Most of you do that. That's fine. Here's your pay. This is what we agreed to. Go away. But at the end of the day, if you do provide minimum wage overtime, if you do withhold taxes, and if you provide any benefits whatsoever, now clearly we're creeping into a check on the employee side of things. Number 8, whether the work is part of the club's regular business. And clearly this goes back to that, is it integral, right? Is it central? Is it necessary? Is it critical to the functioning of the club? If you've got an independent contractor, a worker who does something that you can't do without at your club, he's going to be seen as an employee. That check's going to be in the employee column. Whether the parties believe they're creating an independent contractor relationship is a great sort of factor for us. We know that we'll discuss with fitness instructors, caddies, tennis pros, golf pros. Hey, look, You're starting working with us as an independent contractor. And they'll nod and say, yes, that's good. Continue to communicate that. Make sure there's no question with regard to that. If they have complaints or concerns, you want to continue to push the fact that, well, Bob, you said to me you wanted to be an independent contractor, and that's what we're doing here. This is the relationship that we have. Now, again, folks, that's not going to fix it in the event that what you're being told or what you're telling your employee is really, this is how you have to work. This is how we want you to do things. If you don't do it, we're going to discipline you. If you want time off, please let me know. If you function differently than what you're saying, then simply having an understanding that this working relationship is based on an independent contractor relationship ain't gonna cut it. But at the same time, the more we talk about it, the more it provides someone like me an opportunity to help. So continue to stress that this is indeed functioning as an independent contractor relationship. This number 10 factor, number 11, I'm going to jump to, whether the club is a legitimate business itself, doesn't really apply here. Obviously, clubs are, but number 10 is the interesting factor. That factor is whether the worker is functioning as an independent business. And what the case talked about was this whole idea of entrepreneurial opportunity. And that's what was the basis of the previous law, the law that was overturned by this particular rule. And so the entrepreneurial opportunity means, again, does he have the ability to, for instance, hire people to help him or her work at your club? Does he have strategies, take risks in terms of making more money or capability for the club to make more money or potentially to lose money? It's not his goal to lose money, but he's taking those entrepreneurial activities and opportunities to do so. And does the club constrain in any way this entrepreneurial opportunity? And that means like setting the schedules. Now, yes, that goes to the control, but what we're really talking about is back to that opportunity for individuals to work elsewhere during the time they're working with you. In the Atlanta Opera Company case, if I can't go work on a movie because I'm doing hair and makeup for the opera company, yeah, I may have an entrepreneurial opportunity. And that is, hi, this is, Wigs Are Us, or, IB Magic with my makeup inked. The fact of the matter is, if I am not given an opportunity or if I can't go work someplace else, then yeah, it's an entrepreneurial opportunity because I've taken that. I've put myself out there. I've got the website. I've got the LinkedIn page. I've got business cards. Do they use business cards anymore? And the fact of the matter is that may look good. There's an entrepreneurial opportunity for me and I'm fostering it. But if the club in any way restrains that, then the National Labor Relations Board said, look, that it ain't really an entrepreneurial opportunity, is it? So you may say it, again, form over substance. You can say it, but if it isn't there, then ultimately you're not going to get the benefit of being seen as an independent contractor. The club then is going to be tagged. This person is going to be seen as an employee. That check's going to be in the employee column. So these are the 11 factors that the National Labor Relations Board brought about in this Atlanta Opera Company case. Now have in full effect. Case came down about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. Again, there's nothing they have to do. The National Labor Relations Board waved its magic wand and said it is clearly now the law of the land. They have the right to do that, and they have the opportunity to do that, and they took it. So this rule removes that entrepreneurial opportunity for gain or loss as the core factor that was under the previous rule. And again, like the Department of Labor and its rule, it's a totality of the circumstance. So we're going to weigh up these 11 factors. I guess that's why they made it an odd number. And they're going to determine how much will be in the column for employee, how much will be in the column for independent contractor, and then say, thank you very much. This is an employee, or yes, this is an independent contractor. Obviously, the more factors that we have, the more difficult it is for private clubs to cram their independent contractors into that independent contractor role, right? So that's what we have to worry about. So at the end of the day, much like Georgia, Florida ain't very much union friendly. Happy days, right? There should be the cheers coming from all of you right now. But as I mentioned, the National Labor Relations Board oversees unfair labor practices and union organization actions, meaning caddies, fitness instructors, all of your workers could be protected under the National Labor Relations Act. The only way the National Labor Relations Act comes into play is if they're deemed employees. Again, that's the whole point of the Atlanta Opera Company case. And that is that those workers wanted to join the union. The union is only for employees. So this case was to determine whether they are or are not employees, though the company labeled them independent contractors. So if you get a group of folks who say, look, ultimately, we don't think you're complying with labor rules correctly, we can go under the National Labor Relations Act to the NLRB and file complaints. And the NLRB can tag your club. So the same independent contractors can also be the ones who say, look, while there isn't a heavy union process and population in Florida, at the end of the day, we think we can get a union at your club. You say, well, you're independent contractors, it doesn't work. And they go to the National Labor Relations Board to prove the same kind of things that the makeup artists and hairstylists did in the Atlanta Opera Company case. Even again, in states that don't have a high union population like Florida, the fact of the matter is, this hope opens the door. I mean, it gives unions hopes, not a hell of a lot of hope, but gives them hope. And it's something that you, as an employer, do not want to mess with. Don't give them that hope. Ensure that you comply with the requirements to protect the club. And then, of course, in the event, God forbid, that it's determined, yeah, you know, your tennis pro, your golf pros, they're actually employees and they can unionize, or they're right on this unfair labor practices allegation, you can guarantee that the Department of Labor is going to tag you under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And there may be a class action suit. So, and then, of course, what do we have? Failure to pay taxes. Again, not the main issue, but it's certainly a problem for folks to worry about. So it becomes this domino effect that if they get you on one, they're going to get you on the other. So let's not let them get you anyway. So how do we ensure they don't get you anyway? Well, how do you protect your club? Number one, you got to make sure that those independent contractors stay independent contractors. And what that really means in the private club industry means keep your grubby hands off them, right? Clubs should not in any way, shape, or form have anyone you label as a contractor attend staff meetings, ask for time off, do separate work at the club. One of the New Jersey cases with regard to the caddies being misclassified had those caddies during downtime run drinks to folks on the 9th green, bunker work, do work inside the club, fold towels at the pool. These are all things that, you know, ultimately would be a nice idea to have somebody with two hands do, but you can't have that be done by an independent contractor. Don't have your independent contractors wear your club's logo. One Florida club, great club in Naples, general manager or assistant general manager said to me, Brad, we took your information to heart. Here's what happened. I'm coming across our fitness team, all independent contractors, and they're rummaging downstairs in the storage room under the pro shop. So what were they looking for? Shirts. And I just had this look on my face like, please, God, no. And he said, yep, they were looking for old logoed shirts that they could have. Can't do that. He told them, don't. That connotes that you are an employee. That's going to cause a problem for us. So that reinforces to the independent contractor that you aren't an employee. And it also makes sure that we're showing the world you're not an employee. You're an independent contractor. Wear your own shirt, which is fine. The ballet company that you hire, they do that. They wear their own shirts. That's what you want for everyone else whom you classify as an independent contractor. Again, keep your hands off them. Don't set their prices. Don't schedule them with members. If they want to do stuff with members, great. That's no problem. But have the member click the button on your website. By the way, they should be behind the firewall when they set up anything with regard to lessons or fitness classes or whatever, but have them click the button, and then that click should take them to that independent contractor's website to say who's coming to the Zumba class, who's got that 10 o'clock golf lesson, or who's helping Mrs. Johnson with her backhand. That's where it needs to be. Otherwise, if they're employees, you do it on the club's website, but they're not. They're independent contractors. So, you keep your hands off, let them schedule with members and pay as well. At the end of the day, that pay can be either through a credit card. You can run it through the member's account, but I'd rather have them say, great, you've scheduled the class. I'll be at XYZ Country Club at 10 o'clock and at 11 o'clock. The 10 o'clock class is filled. Let's do the 11 o'clock, and please insert your credit card number. Fine. Again, that's why they're independent contractors. If they're independent contractors, they get paid. If they're employees, I just put it on my chip. See the difference? And those differences pile up. Again, they all go into what? That column. Are they an employee column? Is it in the employee column, or is it in the independent contractor column? That's what we want to protect. And ultimately, make sure that these independent contractors that you have understand they need to be a business. So if nothing else, let them get business cards. If nothing else, have them print up t-shirts or shirts. If nothing else, put a metallic sign, magnetic sign, I should say, on their car. Golf lessons are us. And that's fine. But let's try to put them in a perspective that indeed they're not getting a W-2. They need to file quarterly taxes. They are a business, don't have to be incorporated. I'm not suggesting that, but they have to function as a sole proprietor, because at the end of the day, that's what you're hiring them as. And you're keeping your hands off of them, not to make their life more difficult, but to protect your club. So 3 options to help you do this. Number 1, this is going to avoid you from the class action lawsuits, avoid any suits from the Department of Labor or any allegations from the National Labor Relations Board that employee, that independent contractor is an employee. First, hey, look, have your members hire the independent contractors themselves. Clubs then are completely out of that relationship. So if you want to have the massage, that's fine. Go to our website, click massage, put the time, go to the massage therapist website. So you're out of it. You need a caddy, great. Caddy now, caddy up. Good apps. Those apps connect a willing caddy with a willing golfer. You bring them on the course, they're your responsibility, and have a good day. That's what we want, right? We want that kind of complete removal from those independent contractors. That's important. That's helpful. If we can do that, that's great. But I know that it's hard to educate members on their responsibility with regard to this, why there's liability for the club. And I also understand that some club members just don't want that. Look, I paid $100,000 to join this club. You do it. I'm not going to get online and figure out a caddy or make some determination on when I want to go to the Zumba class. So at the end of the day, I understand some of your members won't like that. So if that first option is not available to you, fine, let's go to the second, engage that third-party entity. You've all heard of example, caddy masters. I've got a contract now. I deal with them. I know what they're like. It's going to cost you about $14,000 to $16,000 a month for your caddies. You're going to establish what the fees are, allow them to be tipped. At the end of the day, they're going to provide the employees, their employees, to come to your club to caddy. Same thing with regard to a fitness company. You do this already with your valet company. So at the end of the day, you've already done it. We just need to expand it into a commercial entity. And that means making that contract clearly indicating, look, you're going to handle all this responsibility. If any of your employees, valet company, work more than 30 hours, you have to provide them with Obamacare, right? But if they were my employee, I'd have to. If you misclassify, not only do you get hit with things like the Fair Labor Standards Act, but then you haven't complied with Obamacare, right? See all the problems? So we want to create that contract, have that third-party entity discuss with you what are your service needs. We can provide those services, those individuals to provide that service. And that's fine. That works for fitness companies, massage companies, caddy companies, valet companies. You do it, take advantage of it. If you don't want to do that, fine. I think the best option is ultimately to take these independent contractors and reclassify them as employees. Yes, I know. It will cost you more money. You'll be providing benefits now when you never have, including things like Obamacare, unless you control the hours. But at the end of the day, I think you're going to have a better opportunity for complete success, and it will benefit the club more. How? Well, first of all, the club then has complete control over this worker. So in the example of that New Jersey club that had caddies running drinks out to the 9th green, the fact of the matter is, I can tell an employee to do that, period, full stop. I'm allowed to. I don't have any question, concern, or issue regarding that. So what you have to focus on is that better, right? Can I have that complete control? Can I train them? Not one person on this call doesn't have their club's way as the training mantra. So Bonita Bay Club, great club, love Fred Fun. Bonita Bay Way. How about Bay Colony, Luann's club? Bay Colony Way, Brad's club. Guess what? You all had that. Lost Tree Club Way. That's what you train. You train who? The dishwasher to the general manager. But you don't train your independent contractors? Folks who may have a lot of time with your members or potentially guests of members. So at the end of the day, guess what? I think it's exceptionally important that we understand that there's a real benefit by having these folks as truly employees. Yes, there's a cost, but they will become ambassadors of the club. And if they're ambassadors of the club, they're going to likely get more gratitude from members and more prospects to say yes. That's the real key. Additionally, don't forget, members expect this service. So even though you may have to charge them a little more, 20% more isn't cheap. I get it. But first of all, most of your members can pay it. And secondly, they expect this service. So all we're doing is providing the service for that fee. And at the end of the day, they already have a caddy fee. They already have a fitness class fee. So they know the cost is there. We're increasing it to do what? Minimize our liability, period, full stop. If your employees, if your members don't know that, then, I got a question as to how they're at your club, because no one who's at your club fails to understand risk mitigation. And there's a cost to it, but at the end of the day, they're willing and should be willing to pay it. And finally, don't worry about your independent contractors. A lot of clubs will say to me, oh no, but if we make them employees, they're not going to have the same kind of cash revenue that they used to have. Well, I understand that. People in hell want ice water, right? I wish I were getting paid in cash. I'm sure you were wishing you were getting paid in cash. It doesn't work that way. So at the end of the day, most folks understand that FICA is a nasty thing, but we have to deal with it. I get a paycheck every 2 weeks, but more importantly, it's consistent. That's a real key for independent contractors. We all know that. And they're still able to get cash. I can still allow tips for my fitness instructor or for my massage therapist or for my caddy. So allow it, the tipping side, and understand that your employees, your workers need to understand that this is a business decision to mitigate risk, but more importantly, welcome to the real world. And at the end of the day, when we start to think about how important this is for private clubs, especially considering what our friends at the Federal Department of Labor are doing and what our friends at the National Labor Relations Board are doing, it's time for us to really take a long, hard look. You've got some time with the DOL. The NLRB is in full effect. Man, let's just hope we can get through this. As your club leadership have questions, please let me know. If you've got questions now, let's jump right into those. I'd love to turn it back over to Sherry. And if you've got questions, I hope that some of you folks will jump on your video and we'll get them squared away. Sherry, let's turn it over to you.
All right, Brad, thank you so much. That was incredibly great information for everyone. So I hope they paid attention. For those participants that want to ask a question, if you want, I will open up, see here, everyone's views. Or you can put it in the chat box and I'll relay it over to Brad as well.
See, look, I made it so clear. I can't believe I made it so clear for everybody.
Don't see anybody open it. Let's see here.
Well, the biggest issue is just making sure that folks remember that this is out there now. And it's really important to take a real sort of long look at exactly who is an independent, who's classified as an independent contractor, whether they really are independent contractors. And then ultimately, how can we make our club more immune to potential issues that arise? If we can do that, boy, that'd be great. And ultimately, I think that's a good thing.
So do you have one quick question here coming in for you, Brad, for clarification on an IC that cannot wear a club logo, even if they choose to purchase on their dime and wear based on their own choice?
Yep. Yeah, that's I'm happy that they made that decision. I'm happy that they put money into the coffers of the club. But again, this is an issue for us. What they're communicating to the world. I know when Bob is coming down after a round of golf that he's a member, right? If I'm a member, I know the members, or at least I'm supposed to know the members. I know in a lot of your clubs, it's hard because they're so big. But at the end of the day, I know those folks who are working or who are not working there. But when I've got an employee or an independent contractor who slaps on that blue, Heritage Bay shirt, our bad news is that's connoting to the world, hi, I work here. And they don't work here. They're an independent contractor. Just like if it's a plumber comes in, what's he going to do? He's going to have his shirt. Now, hi, I'm Brad, and I'm here to fix the toilet. At the end of the day, that's it. That's I don't ask him questions. The Roto-Rooter guy in Nashville, I didn't ask him, excuse me, where's check-in? Where's the starter, right? But if I've got an individual who's wearing that uniform, Now it starts to show that he or she is an employee. So tell them thanks. There's nothing wrong in you saying, look, we want, white shirts or wear your own logo shirt. That's not a problem. It's not too much control to say there is a dress code, an overall dress code. Don't wear, cut off jeans, please. That's fine. But at the end of the day, no, we don't get an opportunity to say just because they're paying for it and just because it's their own free will, that's not going to hurt us. Believe me, the issue that will arise is not so much that they decided to pay the $40 or $50. By the way, they probably got an employee discount. So the reality is that individual isn't going to have a problem when he buys the shirt. It's when he decides that you've been unkind to him or that he needs more from the club than he's been getting, that now that's used against you and you have to deal with it. Well, no, he bought that himself. You didn't require him to. No, are you sure? Well, other folks did. Well, and that's what we want to avoid. So the answer is no. Thank you. Appreciate the money, but no.
Okay, Brad, I have one more. This is from anonymous attendee, it says so.
Oh, anonymous. I love that person. That's a great club too.
It is exactly a good club. Seems like the reality of the situation is that there is risk in classification in parens, caddies specifically, but in the end, it is the totality of the evaluation. More risk with more items you are not 100% in compliance with, and less risk. I'm sorry, there's typos. There's a lot of typos in here.
Yeah, that's right. Whoever this is might want to come on. If we can come on, can we not get him on, Sherry? I don't know.
I don't know. It says anonymous.
But that's all right. If we mess it up, just tell us you messed up.
Okay. This is more risk with more items you are not 100% in compliance with, and less risk with more items you are 100% in compliance with, question mark.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the what you want is to minimize the factors that can be seen against you. So we really want to step away from that independent contractor. So for instance, to use an example that was just brought up, if you only have the individual wearing a shirt that's got your logo on it, but you don't schedule them, set the fees, you don't have them attend meetings, you don't have them ask for time off, you don't discipline them, you don't train them. Boy, that's more stuff that goes into our side to determine, well, on this factor, is it independent contractor or employee? Well, that one I can really check more as independent contractor. So the more we're able to step away from that individual, maybe one or two or three things that you do, fine. But at the end of the day, ultimately, you need to just be able to say, look, this is not my employee. I don't get to control them. End of story. And if I want to control them, if I want them to be in the Bonita Bay way, then make them employees. So there are varying degrees. Obviously, the factors, the 6 from the Department of Labor and the 11 from the National Labor Relations Board, there's factors inside those factors, right? I mean, it sounds like a crazy multiple choice test, but that's the reality. Here's the biggest reality. The biggest reality is this. Under this administration, the determination is that worker is an employee. They're going to find it. So understand that if the National Labor Relations Board determines or has a question of whether an individual can be an employee for union purposes, or whether the club violated the National Labor Relations Act because this is an employee, the National Labor Relations Board is going to find this is an employee. If the Department of Labor was brought in to discuss this issue of whether it is an employee or an independent contractor, this Department of Labor under this administration is going to find that the worker is an employee. So yeah, the less you do, the better. The more you make each one of those factors less and less clear that you're bothering the individual worker, the better it is for you. But I'm just telling you, under this administration, under this Department of Labor, under this National Labor Relations Board, we're going to have an issue. And that issue it's stacked against us. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's how they're interpreting things. And again, they get to weigh, right, whether you've reached the 6 factors. They determine whether there are 4 factors in the favor of employee and 2 as independent contractor under the DOL rule, or whether there are 7 and 4 under the National Labor Relations Board, right? That's the real key. So at this point, keep in mind, you've also got to look at the enforcement environment, and the enforcement environment isn't really that beneficial for us. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, shoot me an email later and we can discuss further.
Okay, we got one more for you, Brad, from Christina Jurek. What about golf instructors? We have staff who can give lessons, and then we also hire ICs who only give lessons and the billing is done independently. Is it a problem to have lessons given by both employees and ICs?
Yeah, that's going to be a difficult one. Again, it's going to go back to those factors. I can just tell you that at the end of the day, if I'm at a golf club, if I'm in a country club, it's hard for me to have independent contractors who are providing golf instruction. If you're telling me that, gee, we don't have enough census to accommodate the need of a full-time employee who's a golf instructor, then make that person a part-timer. But that's one of those particular responsibilities that just, again, is it integral? Is it necessary for the club's operations? Hard to get around that one. More than likely, that I'm happy that he or she is billing separately. That's good. I like that. But again, we're looking at the totality of the circumstances, and I think it's going to be hard to connect. I would assume this person is probably primarily working and permanently. That permanent question. Is he working with you? Has he been with your club for a long time? How many other clubs is he working at? I think you're going to have a difficult time cramming an individual instructor into the position of independent contractor. Swimming instructor, you know what? I like that. That can be an independent contractor. You know why? The pool is there, but we don't have a lot of folks who are using it. There certainly isn't a significant need, and it is an integral part of the club's operations. But boy, it's a country club, right? Or it's a golf club. You're going to have some difficulties with regard to that. 9 times out of 10, we're also then, first of all, they can't be independent contractors. It's going to be hard to do that. And then we're certainly not paying them appropriately. So we've got the Fair Labor Standards Act issue, and then we have potential overtime issues as well. And that falls back to whether they're exempt or they're not exempt. First of all, they'd be labeled as employees more than likely. And then if they're labeled as employees, now we've really got a bunch of issues. So maybe we should talk a little more. You should have been anonymous, Kristen. I'm kidding. So the fact is that's going to be a hard one. And I just think that's more and more difficult. Facts will matter, but it's going to be very difficult with regard to this. And I know a lot of clubs do it. You're not alone. But at the end of the day, that's going to be a hard one to be seen as an independent contractor.
All right. Anybody else have another question for Brad before we
on that upper of an ending, right? That's perfect.
On that high note.
Yeah, happy days. I'm sure you'll all want me. I'm sure Beth can't wait to have me come back. Well, it's been a pleasure as always to spend time with the Florida chapter, all of you. I hope you have a great rest of the off season. I'll look forward to seeing all of you as I get down to Naples.